The hospital room fell silent as Dr. Henry closed the file. "Spinal cord injury," he said, his voice measured and final. "You'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life." Vivian couldn't breathe, staring at her legs as if they belonged to someone else. Her mother turned away. Her fiancé Corbin let go of her hand, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Only Carter remained, a single father she barely knew. He knelt beside the wheelchair, placed his hand over hers, and whispered in a voice raw with emotion, "If you can't walk, I'll be your legs." 3 days earlier, Vivian had controlled everything in her life. At 32, she ran her own consulting firm, wore tailored suits that commanded respect, and had a wedding planned to perfection. Control wasn't just preference. It was identity. Corbin seemed perfect. Investment banker, expensive watches, leased Mercedes. Her mother Bernice loved him, which mattered more than Vivian admitted. Bernice measured success in appearances, dropped Vivian's name at every social gathering as proof of good parenting. Carter Hayes lived in a different America. At 35, he raised his daughter Gwen alone, in a cramped apartment where heating worked sporadically. He worked double shifts at the hospital laundry, breathing steam and bleach for 12 hours, hands chapped from industrial detergent. Weekends meant extra hours cleaning medical equipment because rent didn't care about exhaustion. His manager Otis enjoyed his small power, reminded Carter weekly that tardiness meant termination, that 20 guys wanted his job. The night everything changed, Carter had $43 in his wallet. Gwen's fever had spiked to 103 degrees, forcing him to the emergency room. $43 meant antibiotics, but not groceries. Another week of rice while telling his daughter he'd eaten at work. They met in the ER hallway. Carter sat with Gwen curled against him when ambulance doors burst open. Paramedics wheeled in a woman, dark hair matted with blood, eyes wide with shock. He watched because tragedy demands witnesses. He saw her hand reach out, lips form a name. He saw the man who should have taken that hand, Corbin, in his $1,000 suit, hang back instead, phone pressed to his ear. Then Carter noticed something wrong. Another man approached Corbin, someone who moved with shadowy confidence. Later he'd learn the name. Bernie. They spoke in urgent whispers. Carter had worked enough service jobs to be invisible, to overhear private conversations. He caught fragments. Insurance documentation. Make sure she doesn't remember. Handle the police report. What about the brake line? The last phrase made Carter's blood cold. He'd worked auto repair through his 20s, knew every part of a car. Brake lines didn't fail randomly in modern vehicles. He tucked that observation away, told himself it wasn't his business, focused on Gwen's breathing and the bills he couldn't afford. When Dr. Henry delivered Vivian's diagnosis the next morning, the room became a tomb. Permanent paralysis, no recovery, life-altering injury. Vivian looked at her mother, silently begging for comfort. Bernice pressed her handkerchief to her lips and turned to the window, unable to face her daughter's new reality. The perfect daughter had become imperfect, and Bernice didn't have a script for that. Corbin took 2 steps backward, as if disability might be contagious. His face showed pity mixed with disgust, a man reassessing a bad investment. "I'll call you later. I need to handle some work things." He was gone before Vivian could respond. Social worker, Helen, needed signatures. Someone had to ensure Vivian wouldn't be transferred to a state facility 3 hours away. Bernice shook her head. She couldn't handle this publicly, not where neighbors might judge. Corbin claimed urgent business. Helen looked around the room in quiet desperation and locked eyes with Carter. He was still there. Had been sitting in the corner since dawn with Gwen asleep across his lap, waiting for his daughter's follow-up examination. "Can you sign as a temporary contact?" Helen asked, her voice tired from seeing too many families fall apart. "Just until proper family arrangements are made?" Carter looked at Vivian, really looked at her. He saw past the blood, and the equipment, and the wheelchair. He saw the same terror he'd felt 4 years ago when they'd told him about Matilda, his wife, when he'd stood in an emergency room hallway alone because he'd been working a graveyard shift and hadn't made it in time. He saw someone drowning while the people who were supposed to love her swam away. He picked up the pen. His signature had barely dried when his phone vibrated. "Otis, if you're still at that hospital playing hero, don't bother coming back. Your shift started 20 minutes ago." Carter read the message twice, felt his stomach drop, then turned off his phone. He'd just lost his only source of income. But looking at Vivian sitting motionless in that wheelchair, her entire world collapsed around her. He knew he'd made the right choice. Gwen stirred against him, mumbled something about goldfish, and Carter realized he had no idea how he'd feed her next week. He'd figure it out. He always did. The following days blurred into nightmare. Each morning Vivian forgot for 3 seconds, then remembered. The wheelchair sat beside her bed like a verdict. Every small sound, wheel squeaks, brake clicks, bed adjustments, reminded her of this new life. Corbin visited once more. He brought expensive white orchids, stood near the door positioned for quick exit. "You need to be strong about this," he said, never meeting her eyes, carefully avoiding her legs or the wheelchair. He mentioned postponing the wedding casually, like rescheduling a dentist appointment. Before leaving, he slid a manila folder onto her table. Power of attorney documents. Purely practical. Someone needs to handle your affairs while you recover. Bernice came daily, which felt worse than staying away. She'd straighten bed sheets with tight, angry movements, muttering about inconvenience. "We should move you to my house. Keep this private. You don't want everyone seeing you like this." Like this. As if Vivian had become something shameful. Carter showed up with warm soup in a thermos. He brought a soft lavender blanket Gwen had chosen, washed until it was soft as clouds. He never asked empty questions. Just, "Is the pain worse today? Did you sleep?" He listened, took mental notes, adapted. Gwen would sit coloring, chattering about second grade. Marcus brought his hamster for show and tell, and it escaped in Mrs. Baugh. Thompson screamed and stood on her desk and everyone laughed, and it was the best day ever. She'd look up with gap-toothed delight, treating Vivian like a person instead of a tragedy. The physical therapy room became hell during Vivian's first session. Therapist Ingrid encouraged transferring from wheelchair to parallel bars. Vivian gripped the metal, tried pulling herself up with arm strength alone. Her muscles gave out after 3 seconds. She crashed to the padded floor, helpless as an overturned beetle. Humiliation was complete. Tears came hot and furious. When Ingrid reached to help, Vivian screamed, "Don't touch me! I don't need anyone's pity." That night, alone in her hospital room, Vivian noticed the papers Corbin had left. She read them carefully, her legal mind cutting through the jargon. If she signed these documents, Corbin would control all her medical decisions. He'd manage her finances during her period of incapacity. He'd have authority over her property, her business, her life. And the wording suggested this transfer of power might be permanent, depending on how a court interpreted her capability. Her hands shook. She understood exactly what this meant. If Corbin gained